Okay, let's see how much memory I can get out of this. Should be long enough, but I'm not sure. Not for certain, so we shall see. Okay, so we left off talking about the Phoenix, talking about not needing to be on the defense, essentially. Who you are as a person is enough of a defense, essentially. Is its own defense. It's like not having to prove yourself. Being able to take on just to receive the reality of things. Part of the balance of alchemization is to know what to alchemize and what to just let be. The Lord of Peace restored, pointing inward instead of outward. When we are viewing peace as being something external, or at least being externally validated, that's like, there isn't war, there isn't arguments, everybody's getting along great. That's what peace is. But ultimately, we're talking about a deeper peace that goes beyond that, where even in the midst of trials, tribulations, even in the midst of conflicts and chaos, there's still peace. There's still a certainty of self, that one doesn't need to crash and burn and be reborn in order to prove oneself to oneself. One doesn't have to be on the offense in order to feel defended against the opposition. There's this internal balance that's happening. And justice is being clarified by the Six of Wands in the upright. The Six of Wands. Which is weird because it's almost giving me this feeling of defense, protection. But the duality of it is speaking on like a different defense. So kind of like what I was talking about with like the externalization of things, fighting others as opposed to just letting people be, or engaging with others as opposed to isolating, or isolating as opposed to being able to just be, right? There's like this whole step process. Back before I truly knew myself, and when I was more given to insecurity, and when I was given to people pleasing, and when I was convinced that my contentment and happiness, and that's my value, and the value of life to me, was determined by external validation, I would fight. I never really was much for given to physical fighting, but I would argue. But it's essentially the same shit. Like, I would be very confrontational in that way, because my idea was that I had to defend my beliefs. I had to defend myself. I had to defend these things in order to be protected, in order to be secure, in order to be validated. The more I got to know myself, the more I realized that as long as I was contented within myself, I really didn't need to constantly be fighting. And then I became extremely reserved, where I started protecting myself consistently by just not engaging. And I wouldn't engage. And that has served its own purpose. These are all parts of a step process that is not entirely linear, because everything that you learn can be applied at different points in time, and is to be applied at different points in time. You never want to get so educated that you can't go back to the basics, right? Because life will require both of you. It's stretching you out all the way, but it's also bringing you back down to the basics consistently. So it's about being able to really master those things so that you can, it's not just maturing in those processes, but fully mastering them so that you can always go back to the core as much as you're extending out as far as you can. So in this defense too, like I'm seeing like, so then it's even beyond that, where like now it's not just about isolating yourself, but being able to engage in a way that it protects you, you know, learning an actual defense, being willing to stand up for yourself, being willing to express yourself, being willing to, you know, do what you know is best for yourself without having to make excuses for it. Really being able to engage in a way that fully expresses the wholeness of who you are. How did I put it to a girlfriend of mine earlier, where I was like, if you are I forget exactly how I put it, but it was something along the lines of like, if you're unwilling to embrace every aspect of yourself because you don't want to see certain things when you look into the mirror. You look into the mirror and you suddenly start well, first, if you look into the mirror and you see things that you don't like and you start nitpicking those things, you're really giving focus to those things over anything else. If you're focusing on the negatives rather than the positives, you are giving power to the negatives. And that's not going to serve you. It's about embracing those things, not nitpicking them and being like, I wish that wasn't a part of me. That's senseless. It is a part of you. The best you can do is to embrace it and incorporate it into your entire being, so then you can actively work on it. Because until you're willing to embrace it, you can't do shit with it. It's not in your hands. You can't actually work it out. You know, and like, I remember when I was in Baltimore, which was a wild time for me, but I remember that dude having taught me, the dude that I lived with having taught, which that was like, it was just a wild experience, but having taught me, he was like, at one point, the reason that you're always struggling with your weight is because you consider yourself to be fat, trying to get skinny. But the idea isn't that you are fat. The idea is that you have fat. How did he put it? Yeah, that you have fat, and that you actually are a skinny person that just happens to have fat, right? That I'm not a fat person trying to be skinny. I'm a skinny person that just happens to have fat. And to see that person inside of you and who it is that you really want to be, and to be able to properly visualize who it is you really want to be, and then act on that. You know, if I really want to be some hot bitch, I'm not going to sit around eating hot chips all day, not doing shit. You know, that's not what hot bitches do. There's a reason they're hot. So like, I can be completely contented in myself to be able to be like, this is what I bring to the table. This is what I've got. I'm just going to live my life freely. That's fine. But like, that's not in alignment with like me wanting to be physically fit or, you know, have like a disciplined diet. If those are things I actually care about, those are things I need. It's not just going to happen for me. It's not just going to magically appear. Those are things that require work, and they require that visualization in order to step into that point. It will be completely disheartening if you just see yourself as like some fat person moving around a bunch. You know what I mean? But like, when you can start to recognize who you really are underneath all of that, it'll start to give into that, where suddenly like you start carving yourself out of yourself. Now I'm talking about the physical, but we're also talking about the spiritual, the mental, the emotional. You want to be a nicer person? Start being nice. Take that risk. You want to be a more assertive, aggressive, confident person? Start doing those things. Start being those things. Stop apologizing for who you are. Stop submitting to people that you don't even care about. Stop finding other people intimidating. You know, you want to be rich. Stop spending so much money. Start saving more. Start making more money. Like, you have to be willing to compromise those comforts and conveniences in order to be able to accomplish the things that you truly want. It doesn't come by just saying, well, this is what I want for 2025. And then it just magically happens. No. Come this time next year, you're going to be in the same place that you are this year, which was looking back on the year saying, either I accomplished the things I set out to accomplish, or I didn't accomplish the things that I said I wanted to accomplish because I never actually set out to accomplish them. Or I set out but didn't consistently remain on that path. And like, by all means, make changes. You don't, just because you said on December 31st that this was something you wanted to do doesn't mean that you have to continue doing that. But be honest with yourself. Hold your vows to yourself. Commit those things into yourself, and you will be much better off for it. You know, like when I was celibate this past year, I gave myself 6 months of celibacy. It's not necessarily hard for me to be celibate for an extended period of time. It almost is like I want to be able to engage to some degree, at least a little bit, because otherwise it's like the more I'm celibate, the easier it is for me to be that way. And I don't want to lose that part of myself. I love my sexuality, but I don't like giving it to just anybody. I don't like giving it to most people. I'm actually quite tired of giving it to basically everyone. So, you know, part of my process was like, there were a couple times when it got difficult because I was engaging with somebody that I was like, oh, this will add on to the connection, right? This is what I'm looking for. Ultimately, I want to be able to engage in those types of things. But had I been more given to it, like, and less committed to it, it wouldn't have mattered if it was a month, if it was 6 months, if it was 6 years. If the way that I engaged with it, upon engaging with it, wasn't in the mind of a renewed mind, a refounded belief in things, a new direction, if I just went about it the same way I'd always gone about it, all I'm showing is that it didn't matter how much time it took, I still haven't learned. Yet, even if I commit for 6 months and then a day later decide that I'm going to change that, now suddenly I'm a sex worker, right? But if I do that truly in the genuine aspect of myself, then that shows it'll validate the change itself. But it really comes within that core of the person. You have to let things hit your core person in order to be able to move forward in those ways. And that's obviously just a weird example, and I'm not trying to encourage people to do one or the other. Both are extremes, but you know, so many of us love to make resolutions for the new year, and then we don't follow through. And I know that we talk about this every year, but like these past few years, like these past 5 years since 2020, like I really have been meeting the goals that I anticipated. I set reasonable goals, and I've watched myself succeed in them. I set further goals that I hoped to reach, but the reasonable goals that I set have been attained, and the other ones were flexible, and I've seen some succeed and I've seen some fall through. Ultimately, I've been satisfied with where I've come, but I have so much more I want to do with my next year, right? And so I can't just get lazy, and I can't just get in this mindset of like, well, I didn't really see all of the successes, so it's probably not worth it. Like, no, I've definitely seen the benefits of consistency and doing an internal work, and it only drives me forward that way, to be honest. At the same time, like, I have to be willing to embrace change and to reset what it is that I really care to do for myself. To do whatever I believe is truly going to be best and serve my best interests in the long run. Okay, so now this is bringing us to that slight change that I had on the cards when I pushed these cards down, and now they're at this different level. Because now what I'm seeing is that the Six of Wands is connected to the Empress fully. the Empress in reverse, the Six of Wands in the upright, the Lord of Victory, the Daughter of the Mighty Ones in the reverse, the Lord of Victory, right? So we're talking about being humble. Being humble. A large part of my personal process this entire time, and with the changes that I've made in my life and the things that I've gone through and this journey that I've been on and all the choices that I've made on it, have come from having to hoist myself up in a sense of confidence in order to move forward. And for many, that'll be the case. Many haven't come into a certain confidence, and that is what they have to do, because they've been holding themselves back. I'm actually being told to kind of pull in the reins a little bit in order to better focus on the goals at hand. I did the internal work in the confidence process in order to get myself to where I've come. But now there's a new level for myself, at least, and for others that can resonate with this, that it's about being able to be calm, being able to be at peace, being able to work within faith, and to do like these small direct points. It's not having these, I have big dreams, I do. But in order to see them fulfilled, it's taking these small direct steps in those directions that is actually going to reach that fulfillment, not just dreaming big. I've done the dreaming. Now it's time for me to actually start building on those things, right? And what that looks like is being humble. Humble enough that, like, unlike the phoenix, I don't have to keep bursting forth out of the ashes, glowing that way in order to thrive, to survive, to glow, even, to grow. Like, it doesn't have to be this huge, huge thing. It's so interesting because, like, I feel like there's big changes coming into my life. But in certain ways, I can see how they're actually progressions of other changes that I've made. And that the biggest part is really the way I go about these things and what I make of these things, truly. Yeah, just doing things different. Being willing to be more vulnerable, more honest. Not going about things with this, like, preset idea of, like, okay, I've got this big goal and I've got to be larger than life about it. I've done that, and it's been all great and good, but there's something else I'm doing now. The Six of Wands. I'm just trying to see if there's any other, trying to pick up on the energy. Is there any other meanings going on here? I just really want to focus back on that humility thing, on the being vulnerable, on the being humble, on the being genuine, rather than being perfect or being right or being great. It's kind of giving me that energy too of, like, letting people see you trying, letting people see you figure it out, letting people see you fall, letting people see you pick yourself back up, letting people see your process. I've been doing that. I've been doing that for the last 2 years. So it's interesting because it's almost like, yeah, in the same way, a lot of these cards are speaking on this inversion. And so it's like, I've been doing that. And so that's now what other people are doing. And so now I'm in this other position of, like, being able to recognize that, being able to guide people through that, and being able to really be on the other side myself. What I'm noticing right now as I'm saying this is that in this Two of Swords card that's up at the very top, in the reverse, it's right above the Six of Swords that's being clarified. I guess I will show you this card. They both have that same flower symbol in the back. They both have the same flower, and then they both have the same flower symbol in the back. And because the Two of Swords is in the reverse, they're pointing at each other, and it's showing this reflection of like it being one way in the way that people are viewing it towards me, but it's in another way that I'm giving it back to them. And I think that'll be a struggle for some people. Those that have opposed me, or to any degree, really, those that just haven't wanted to see things that I've been doing for what they are, like, they're going to have to see that this work was intentional, that, like, I really have been doing it, that, like, the person that I've become speaks for itself and is capable and worthy of that. And they might not want to give that full credit, but anything at all that they give it is being turned back into proof of these things, into a proof of a victory, into the proof that like I did go through these things, I did actually process these things. Like, I can say and talk about my life and the traumas that I've been through and all the crazy things that I've experienced and everything like that all day, and I do, right? I can talk about these things all the time, and people can receive those things. Generally, it's people that are actively in those things themselves that seem to understand the best, which is always frustrating. But it's changing, because now it'll be like this way where like people will actively engage with those things in such a way, like even just in communications, but in such a way where like they won't be able to, it'll prove itself. Like they won't be able to deny that these things, the only way that you would know what I know about certain things is if you've actively gone through certain things, if you've actually done the work. And in the same way, I mean, anything that I don't know is because I haven't done the work or I haven't gone through that experience, right? But like everything that I do speak on with this sense of passion, with this sense of, you know, truth, like it's because I've been there. It's because I've done this process. It's because I've truly like not only experienced it, but become fully aware of that experience and then alchemized it and then continued to build off of that alchemization. It's an entire process and one that I've become very good at. And I've been waiting for the world to catch up, to be honest. Not like I'm so great at all. I just was trusting the universe and it just happened to use me in these ways. There's plenty of others that are right there with me. And we've just been waiting for this divine alignment of timing for everything to kind of fall into place. And like, I can tell you that like right now, when I look at the external, it still isn't fully added up, but it's in such a weird way. It's in a way that like, if you weren't really paying attention, you could easily fall for the illusion still. It's trying so hard. But when you really recognize it, then you can look at these things and like what you see, instead of people like trying to bully you into self-doubt, like you see it as that. And suddenly you realize that these people are like looking at you like, they know that you know something that they don't. They know that you have something that they don't. A lot of people come at that with jealousy, come at that with like a toxic sense of codependency, a feeling of like, if I can just sneak underneath your knowledge, then I can take these things from you and then I can have them. And like, it has a built-up defense in itself where like you can't do that because it speaks for itself. Like, only I could be who I am today. Nobody else can take that from me. Oh, it's so wild and it's so deep. There's so many different things that I would love to be able to share. I'm actually, like, it's interesting enough because what I'm being told right now is that, like, as opposed to in the past where I've been given certain information and then, like, putting it out prior to those things happening, and been leading up into it, I'm actually coming into a space where, like, I'm going to be able to validate. I can still speak on things in the future at times, but like, it's mostly like, it's almost like this energy of I told you so, but like, I'm going to have to find a way to alchemize that so that it's not that, because that isn't helpful. Nobody wants to hear that. That ultimately isn't helpful. The humility does its own thing already, or the humbling process, right? The universe is already humbling a person. They don't need to hear that. It's not about my ego being satiated, but it's about being able to stand up and accept that role in order to be like, yeah, I know. I saw it coming. I tried to warn you, or I this is what I've been talking about. You know, this is what we can do about it from this point forward. This is where we can go from here. Very interesting. This is all being clarified by the devil in the upright. It's like, it's your villain era, baby. So what we've had in the past, as far as spiritual leaders, enlightened ones, you know, ascended masters, high priests, you know, Buddhas, any of those types of you know, prophets, that type of idea, right? What we've had thus far. Muhammad now serves a greater purpose, actually, I think, than even back in the original text's time. I should say, may he be blessed. But for the fact that, you know, in the time, people looked at him the same way that they've looked at essentially every prophet, every Buddha, every high priest, and that's in this way of like, they're righteous, they're higher evolved, they're more in touch with God, they're on a better path, they've got it figured out, they're doing it right, they're somehow untouchable in that way, they're separate from the rest of the world, right? To the degree, like, that's what gave Jesus Christ all of his power, was that he was if he wasn't this higher idea of a being, his sacrifice wouldn't have meant shit. It would have meant just as much as the thieves that died beside him did. And nobody is sitting there creating an entire religion out of them, right? I don't see why not. But because of that idea that Jesus was somehow more perfect. Jesus himself swore that he wasn't. But the people saw him as such. And that has been the case for all of our high priests and prophets and what have you for thousands of years now. What is becoming, what this time is, the reason, I mean, you know, the same thing with like any sort of females, like Mother Mary, Mother Teresa. Like, Mother Teresa was just a person, right? Literally just a person. Considered a saint, and as soon as you consider somebody a saint, it's like, because they're so much higher than anybody else, they have these high morals and this high potential, and they fulfill those things. Ultimately, all that's done, it's not all that's done, it served its purpose, but what that's doing now is just becoming an excuse for people to be their worst selves, because they're like, well, I can't be that. I'm never going to be that. I'm not perfect. I can't do that thing. I can't do that thing. I'm like this and I'm like that. And I've already done this and I've already done that. So I might as well just be the worst version of myself. well, the world's already shit, so we might as well just let it get worse. Everything's already terrible. We might as well just say fuck it. So what we're coming into now is that the concept of a savior is no longer going to be found in those meeting unattainable standards to that degree. That used to be our concept of being able to reach for the stars, being able to hold ourselves to such a impossible seeming standard that was what allowed the freedom for us to become any highness of our own potential. The idea was never that we were going to be perfect, but that in seeking perfection, in sacrificing ourselves for the sake of perfection, we would become our most perfected selves, which ultimately wouldn't be that, but would be enough of that on a personal level that we could be received as that in the end. What I'm seeing now is that the people don't need a savior. They don't even need a friend. It's not even like a father. It's much like a commander. I don't like that. But I get it. No, I accept it. I get it. I get it. You know, in this card, there's these two demon creatures. They're abominations. They're a mix of all kinds. They're chimeras. They're a mix of all types of weird animal, human-like things. Kind of nonsensical. They're tied. They're chained. They're chained to this pedestal that this devil sits upon. But the thing about it is almost that, like, they don't even seem, like, upset about it. One seems a little nonchalant and apathetic to begin with, like he just doesn't give a fuck. And the other is almost like an extra perverted, where he's like, I actually kind of like being tied to this. And that's where we're at. We have a whole bunch of people that actually like to be tied to these limited concepts, and people that are so apathetic that they don't give a fuck that they're not going to do anything greater than that. And those people need something to keep them in line. That's their only purpose now. I mean, they've been completely given over to this. Oh, it's so wild. We're talking about the Clone Wars, essentially. And I've seen it, and I've watched it, and I've been so frustrated with it, and it's like, that's not served anything. Okay. I don't know how to cultivate. This is like taking me somewhere deeply personal, so I don't exactly know how to cultivate this into the rest of the reading. Can I have one final card to bring into the reading? Thank you. In order to make this something. Came out on its side. The Two of Cups. The Lord of Love. I haven't seen this card before. So it has the Divine Hand with a lotus in it. And out of the lotus is these... Well, there's two cups. But then they come up and then there's these two porpoises. And the porpoise, in between the porpoises is a water spout that comes up into its own cup. That is itself a lotus. And then out of that cup is pouring out into the other two cups. And it's out of those cups that everything is flowing in order to build this lotus. Porpoises are like a sense of playfulness, a sense of fertility, a sense of community, family, a sense of intellect. We're talking about sustainability. There's 2 cups that feed into these porpoises, that feed into a greater cup that pours out into all things. Don't be afraid of the multiple aspects of who you are. Of the 2, I think generally most people at this point could reflect on this concept of having like 2 opposing sides. I have the person that I am, and I have the person that I want to be. I have the person that I know myself to be and the person others know me to be. I have who I project myself as and who I receive myself as. I have who I desire to be, who I'm afraid to be, you know, like there's always these conflicts of some sort of extreme within ourselves. And the last message that I'm getting out of this is mostly just to be able to integrate those things into yourself fully. To really embrace the power of all that you are. You're not just the loving being that turns everything into something positive. You're also the selfish being that is afraid of things that are negative, and that's why you do those positive things in the first place. And that's okay. It's part of who you are. You have to, the longer you go without embracing those things, the harder it's going to be to actually get on top of those things, right? It's just another thing to alchemize. You're not just the conceited asshole that struggles in relationships. You're also the soft, tender child that didn't know any better while they were being, you know, handed offenses. And this was the only way that you knew how to protect yourself growing up. And now you're being asked to alchemize those things so that you can become something so much greater and more beneficial for yourself. You know, there's this whole balance. There's so many ways that we can perceive ourselves, and ultimately we're all of those things and more. And more. I also was told once and convinced by that dude in Baltimore that if somebody truly can receive you away, and especially if multiple people are receiving you away, it doesn't matter if that's actually how you are or believe yourself to be or not, because by somebody else believing it, it still is true of you. And so, like, if somebody believes you to be a liar, if they truly believe you to be a liar, it's one thing if they're just saying it because they're trying to come against you. But if somebody really struggles to trust you, it doesn't matter if you're actually trustworthy and you're really not lying and you're really trying to be a good person. It's still a reflection of you, and you have to consider, why is it that this person, no, it's a reflection of them more than it ever is going to be of you. It's a reflection that they're struggling to trust. But there's still an aspect of it that you can take personally to be like, okay, so what can I do? If I'm being genuine, but somebody is still not able to receive me as such, what can I do to ensure that I'm as genuine as possible? Does it matter that I'm properly received all the time? Is there ways that I can adjust the way that I am received so that I'm more genuinely received? You know, it's still, there's always an aspect that can be considered within oneself in order to do that alchemization process. And so I'm seeing with the 2 porpoises kind of like being like that idea where it's not even necessarily talking about another person. It could be ultimately talking about, like, you know, as if you're really right on path with me, it's talking about like an alignment in the future with these different types of things. But I think ultimately within this reading, it's talking about truly being able to look at the opposing aspects of yourself and being able to integrate those things, being willing to receive those things, being willing to look at those things and say, yeah, that's part of me, that's who I am. And if it's not who you want to be, being willing to process those things so that you can work on them. But being willing to, yeah, be like, okay, that must be a part of me. That's something I need to work on. This is such a weird reading. I was hoping that this was going to be different for the last reading of the year. But it is what it is. I hope that it serves you. We'll see about next year, how it goes. I don't know. I'm feeling a deep moving of something in some direction. But I don't know exactly what it is or what it's going to look like or be. I don't know. I don't know. All right. Well, I hope that you are enjoying yourself. I hope that, chances are you're probably seeing this and it's already the next year. So take your time to do things right. Don't feel like you have to rush into this year just because of a calendar change. Like, it doesn't actually mean shit. It really doesn't. But at the same time, don't procrastinate either. Don't just make excuses like, well, I'll just wait till this time or till this time or till this time. It's already, this, or it doesn't really matter, Don't worry about things being in that, like linear calendar year measurement, because it's not about that. But let those things work for you, let those things be a guide to some degree, sure. But more than anything, just consider that, like, it has been 365 days since this time last year. That's a lot of days. 365 days. Each one of those days was a choice, was a series of choices towards building the lives that we want. And honestly, so much this year, especially like with Trump becoming president and stuff, I heard a lot of complaining of people just being like, oh, I don't really care. This isn't the world I want to live in. I'm so unhappy with the way that things are. And being like afraid of everything that's happening and nobody actually doing shit. So the only thing I can really say is, like, please don't let this be another year of us doing that. I understand that it might be grueling work. 5 years ago, I wouldn't have known how much it would take to get to this point. I had no idea how much I was going to lose, how much I was going to hurt, how much I was going to go through, how incredibly dangerous certain things would be, how incredibly fruitless other things would be. I had no idea. But through it, I've maintained, I've continued to do the work, I've continued to work on faith. And in these 5 years, I have seen everything do a 180. Some things even do a 360, but sometimes for the better too. But ultimately, like, I've seen so much fundamental change that I am nothing but grateful for. And all of that's just to say that, like, the work really is worth it. And it goes by so much quicker than you think. And it, like, I mean, if you look at me 5 years ago and you look at me now, like, I'm in a significantly better place. I take better care of myself. I do better for myself. Like, I do better by others. I'm significantly better off than I was 5 years ago. It was worth it. I was trying to kill myself 5 years ago. That's the last time. Really, truly. So, like, things can change, and it really is worth it. But you have to do the work. So, like, take it slow, take it easy, do what you need to do. I'm under the impression that things are not going to take so long, that things are actually going to start moving very, very quickly. But don't worry about that as much as you just, like, know yourself so that you can know what to really do. And don't doubt yourself anymore. Don't be fighting yourself. Don't let other people fight with you. Do your thing. Do your thing and do it in confidence. And what you see on the other side, you're going to be quite happy with it. You will be quite happy with it. So, Thanks for listening, and I will see you next year.